Ellie Novak had exactly two priorities in life: graduate from Lakeview Community College without drowning in debt, and consume enough caffeine to function on 4 hours of sleep. Everything else was negotiable. Xenobiology 101, she muttered, scrolling through the course catalogue on her tablet. Study of theoretical alien life forms. No prerequisites. 3 easy credits. Perfect. She needed one more elective, and this sounded like the science fiction equivalent of underwater basket weaving. The kind of class where you watched Star Trek clips and discussed whether tribbles could exist. She hit enroll and took another swig from her thermos of industrial-strength coffee. 2 weeks later, Ellie slouched into the lecture hall, half asleep and late, only to find the classroom nearly empty. Just 6 other students scattered throughout a room designed for 60. Not a good sign. A lanky man with wild grey hair and a tweed jacket covered in mysterious stains stood at the front, drawing what looked like an anatomical diagram of something with too many limbs. "Ah, welcome," he boomed. "You must be Ellie Novak. Take a seat. We were just discussing the respiratory system of the Andorian exo-squid." Ellie blinked. The professor was talking about this fictional creature like it was real. Great. One of those professors who stayed in character all semester. "I'm Professor Quint," he continued, "former xenobiologist for the North American Defense Alliance's extraterrestrial division." Ellie slid into a seat next to a pale guy with oversized sunglasses who seemed to be sweating profusely despite the room being freezing cold. "Now, as I was saying, the exo-squid's 13 lungs allow it to process the methane atmosphere of Andoria Prime quite efficiently, which is why they were the obvious choice for the initial diplomatic envoy to Earth in 2037. Ellie leaned toward sweaty sunglasses guy. "Is this guy for real?" The guy jerked like he'd been electrocuted. "What do you mean?" "Humans have known about aliens for decades. This is a practical course." Ellie snorted. "Right, and I'm the queen of MS Novak." Professor Quint called. "Since you're so chatty, perhaps you'd like to tell us which Earth delegation first established contact with the Galactic Cooperative." NASA?" she guessed wildly. The entire class, all 6 of them, burst into laughter. "NASA." Professor Quint wiped an actual tear from his eye. "Oh, that's rich." "No, MS Novak, it was the International Barista Championship of 2042. The smell of the espresso competition attracted a passing Vexnorian survey ship." Ellie stared. Either this was an elaborate prank, or she'd accidentally enrolled in some weird role-playing class. The professor flicked his hand, and suddenly the wall behind him transformed into a high-definition screen, showing what appeared to be security footage of, well, aliens. The grey-skinned creatures with 4 arms ordering macchiatos from a confused-looking barista. "This can't be real," she whispered. "Humans," said Sunglasses Guy with obvious disdain. "Always the last to know what's happening on their own planet." The professor continued. "The Galactic Cooperative has had relations with Earth for nearly 20 years. Most humans are too busy taking selfies or arguing on the internet to notice the Andorian embassy in downtown Milwaukee." When class ended, Ellie remained frozen in her seat while the others filed out. Professor Quint approached, his bushy eyebrows raised. "First day shock, eh? Don't worry, happens every semester. 1 or 2 students always enroll thinking we're discussing science fiction. But aliens? Real aliens? Very real. Very bureaucratic, most of them. Did you know the Ziltoid Confederation requires 47 different permits just to speak to a human? I spent 6 years in the military filling out their paperwork." He chuckled. "That's why I prefer teaching, fewer forms." Ellie clutched her coffee thermos like a lifeline. "So all those UFO conspiracy theorists were right?" "Oh, goodness, no. Those people are nuts. Real aliens don't abduct random farmers at night. They schedule appointments through proper diplomatic channels." He shuffled his papers. "Welcome to Xenobiology 101, MS Novak. The syllabus is on the class portal. First assignment due Friday." As Ellie stumbled out into the hallway, her phone pinged with a notification from her banking app. The words tuition payment processed, no refunds after ad drop period glowed mockingly on the screen. Well, she was stuck with Alien 101 now, and judging by the way Sunglasses Guy was now licking the water fountain with a forked tongue when he thought no one was looking. This semester was going to be way more complicated than she'd bargained for. Partner projects. Professor Quint announced the following week, waving a stack of papers. You'll be researching interspecies cultural customs and presenting your findings at the end of the month. Ellie groaned. Group projects were bad enough with humans. She eyed her classmates warily. There was Sunglasses Guy, who she now suspected wasn't human, the twins in the back who finished each other's sentences in what sounded like clicks and whistles, a girl with purple hair who might actually be normal, and a hulking guy who hadn't once removed his winter coat, despite the classroom being a comfortable 72 degrees. I'll be assigning partners, Quint continued, prompting another collective groan. Ellie Novak and Doug Ferris. Sunglasses Guy raised his hand. It's pronounced D-Ug. What? Ellie squinted at him. My name? It's pronounced D-Ug, not Doug. He made a strange clicking sound in the middle that Ellie was fairly certain human vocal cords couldn't produce. Professor Quint ignored this exchange. You'll be researching the cultural significance of food and beverages across species. Focus on how a single substance can have vastly different effects on different physiologies. After class, D-Ug approached Ellie with the stiff gait of someone who recently learned how knees work. Greetings, study partner, he said, his voice slightly too loud. Shall we commence our research at the learning repository? You mean the library? Yes, the library, where humans store information on primitive data tablets rather than neural implants. Fascinating custom. Ellie sighed. Look, D-Ug or Doug or whatever, I know you're not human. D-Ug froze mid-step. What? Haha. What a humorous accusation. I am completely human. I enjoy human activities like consuming solid nutrients and exhaling carbon dioxide. You have 3 fingers on each hand, and you're wearing sunglasses indoors because your eyes reflect light in the dark. I saw it when the lights dimmed for the presentation. D-Ug's shoulders slumped. Please don't report me to your authorities. I'm an exchange student from the Moldovan cluster. We're supposed to maintain our cover. Relax, I don't care. But if we're going to work together, at least be honest. Later at the library, they claimed a study room and spread out their materials. D-Ug kept trying to access the computer by pressing his forehead against the screen until Ellie showed him how the keyboard worked. Our project is about food and cultural significance, Ellie said, pulling up research databases. Any suggestions? Oh. My species communicates partially through scent glands. We secrete different compounds to convey emotions. It makes dining together very meaningful. That's gross but kind of interesting. She made some notes. What about humans? What food do you find weird? All of it. You cook things. With heat. It's barbaric. D-Ug shuddered. But most puzzling is your intentional consumption of toxins and poisons. What do you mean? Capsaicin, alcohol, caffeine. He pointed at her ever-present coffee thermos with horror. That beverage contains a neurotoxin that would kill most sentient species. Ellie blinked. Coffee? No way. Yes way. D-Ug called out a tablet, not Earth technology, judging by the holographic display. Let me access the galactic database. He pulled up a file labeled classified, Earth biological hazards, and began reading. Caffeine. A methyloxanthine alkaloid produced by certain earth plants as a natural pesticide is lethal to 94% of known sentient species. Humans are the only known species that intentionally cultivate and consume this toxin in large quantities, often displaying addiction-like behaviors. Ellie took a sip of her coffee. So I'm basically drinking bug poison that would kill an alien. Precisely. It's terrifying. The Galactic Cooperative has strict regulations about caffeine transport. It's considered a controlled substance on par with, what do you call them, nuclear weapons. You're saying my Starbucks habit is equivalent to owning a nuke? Diug nodded solemnly. The fact that humans casually consume it shows how extraordinarily resilient your biological systems are. It's why many species fear humans. Fear us? But we're not even part of your Space Federation thing. A cooperative. Diug corrected. And humans have observer status only. Your species is considered too unpredictable. You're the only sentient beings who actively seek out mind-altering substances for recreation. As they continued researching, Ellie discovered more bizarre facts. Chocolate was hallucinogenic to at least 7 species. Citrus could induce temporary paralysis in another 3. And caffeine, particularly in concentrated forms like espresso, could cause everything from psychosis to molecular dissolution depending on the species. We should use this for our project, Ellie said excitedly. Cross-species reactions to common Earth beverages. Diog looked nervous. We should stick to theory. The military document I showed you was actually classified. How did you access it then? I may have certain hacking abilities. My species has natural bioelectric fields that interact with digital systems. Cool. We're definitely using this. As she typed up their project outline, neither of them noticed the small print at the bottom of the classified document. Warning: caffeine exposure to Vexnorian physiology may result in catastrophic diplomatic incidents. Protocol 773 requires immediate containment. Section 3. Caffeine Chaos. Ellie hadn't worn a dress since her high school graduation, but the campus cultural exchange day apparently required semi-formal attire. According to the email from Professor Quint, she tugged at the borrowed sundress that her roommate had insisted looked cute, and carried a tray of paper cups filled with samples of various Earth beverages. Remember, Diog whispered as they entered the campus event center, now transformed with international flags alongside banners representing various alien worlds. This event is mostly for show. The real diplomats are observers only. These are cultural attaches and junior diplomatic staff. Got it. Ellie nodded, surveying the bizarre scene before her. Most attendees appeared human at least at first glance, but once you knew what to look for, the signs were everywhere: slightly off movements, unusual fashion choices clearly meant to hide non-human features, and conversations that occasionally slipped into clicks, hums, or subsonic rumbles. Professor Quint spotted them and hurried over. He wore what might generously be called a tuxedo, if tuxedos were typically salvaged from 1970s prom photos and patched with leather elbow pads. Ah, Team Beverage has arrived. Excellent. Your station is by the west wall. The Rigelian delegation is particularly interested in your presentation. Professor, Ellie asked, are there any species here who should, avoid certain drinks? Everything's labeled, isn't it? They'll know what to avoid. Before Ellie could explain that no, she hadn't actually labeled anything yet, Quint was swept away by a woman in a sleek silver pantsuit who appeared to have gills behind her ears. We should hurry, Diog said, visibly sweating again. The Vexnorian ambassador arrives soon, and they're very punctual. Vexnorian? Ellie balanced her tray carefully. Are they the ones with the caffeine sensitivity you mentioned? Extreme sensitivity. Their biochemistry. Whatever Diog was about to say was cut off by a commotion at the entrance. A delegation of tall, elegantly dressed beings with iridescent grey skin and elongated features had arrived, led by a particularly distinguished individual wearing an elaborate collar of what appeared to be living flowers. That's Ambassador K. Rax, Diog whispered, his voice rising in pitch. The highest-ranking Vexnorian official on Earth. Great, Ellie mumbled. Let's set up quickly. They arranged their samples on the designated table: fruit juices, tea, hot chocolate. And because Ellie hadn't had time to make a separate trip several cups of coffee from her morning coffee run, she was hastily making labels when a shadow fell across the table. Ah, traditional Earth libations, came a melodious voice. Hey, how cultural. Ellie looked up to find Ambassador K. Rax towering over her, accompanied by an entourage of junior diplomats. Up close, the Vexnorian's skin had a subtle pattern that shifted like oil on water, and those flowers around his neck seemed to be reacting to his mood, but opening and closing rhythmically. Yes, Ambassador, she stammered. Would you like to try some? K-Rax's eyes, entirely silver with no visible pupils, surveyed the offerings. I've been meaning to experience more Earth cuisine. Your Professor Quint speaks highly of your beverages. Ellie reached for a cup of orange juice, but in her nervousness, she grabbed a coffee instead. By the time she realized her mistake, K-Rax had already accepted the cup with a graceful four-fingered hand. No, wait, Diog began, lunging forward. Too late. The ambassador took a dignified sip. For exactly 3 seconds, nothing happened. K-Rax smiled politely. Then his silver eyes widened. The flowers around his neck puffed up like startled cats. A subtle vibration began at his feet and traveled upward until his entire body hummed like a tuning fork. Ambassador? One of his aides asked cautiously. K-Rax's response came in a voice 3 octaves higher than before. I can taste the color 9. The universe is speaking to my toenails. The ambassador began spinning in place, arms outstretched, while emitting a high-pitched warble that shattered 2 nearby wine glasses. His skin shifted rapidly through the entire spectrum, settling briefly on a vibrant purple before cycling again. The gravity is optional, he announced, before attempting to prove this theory by leaping onto a table of hors d'oeuvres and performing what could only be described as alien river dance. The room erupted into chaos. Other aliens began backing away or filming with their devices. Humans stood frozen in confusion. Diog had disappeared entirely, possibly through the nearest exit or possibly by some alien teleportation ability Ellie didn't know about. Professor Quint pushed through the crowd, face ashen. What happened? I accidentally gave him coffee, Ellie admitted. I didn't know it would. Coffee? Quint looked horrified. Caffeine is like weaponized LSD to Vexnorians. It completely disrupts their neural pathways. Ambassador K-Rax had now removed his outer robe and was wearing it as a cape, proclaiming himself Emperor of Jazz Hands while his mortified aides tried to corner him. The double doors at the entrance burst open as a team of serious-looking people in black suits stormed in, led by a severe woman with a sharp bob haircut and an earpiece. Bureau of Extraterrestrial Affairs, she announced, flashing a badge. I'm Agent Morgan. Secure the perimeter and prepare for memory modification protocols. She zeroed in on Ellie with laser focus. You, coffee girl. You're coming with me. As Ellie was escorted out, she caught a glimpse of Ambassador K-Rax being restrained by his own staff while he attempted to communicate with a potted plant he had declared his new Secretary of Defense. And everywhere, phones were recording. Is he going to be okay? Ellie asked as Agent Morgan marched her toward a black SUV. The ambassador? Eventually. Vexnorian physiology metabolizes caffeine in about 6 hours, but interstellar relations. She gave Ellie a grim look. Those might take longer to recover, especially since this is already trending on 17 different planets' social media. Agent Morgan held up her phone, showing a video with the caption, Human Weapon of Mass Destruction, coffee with over 3 million views and climbing. Ellie had expected to be detained in some underground government facility. Instead, Agent Morgan had escorted her to a Denny's. The syrup is good for deterring certain types of alien surveillance, Morgan explained, drowning her pancakes in maple syrup. Plus I skipped lunch. Across the sticky table, Ellie's untouched coffee grew cold. After yesterday's disaster, she wasn't sure she'd ever drink it again. Am I in trouble? She finally asked. Agent Morgan dabbed her mouth with a napkin. Let's see. You accidentally drugged the ambassador of a species with a history of militaristic responses to perceived insults during a public event, causing him to perform what Vexnorians consider obscene dance moves in front of 17 different alien delegations. And the video is now the most watched clip in the history of galactic social media. She smiled thinly. What do you think? Ellie's phone vibrated. A news alert. Vexnorian Empire mobilizes fleet following coffee attack on ambassador. She turned the screen toward Agent Morgan, who simply nodded. This isn't the first coffee incident, just the most public. We've been managing caffeine-related diplomatic crises since first contact. Usually we can contain them. But not this time. The ambassador was broadcasting live to his home world. Millions of Vexnorians watched their highest official experience what they're calling a chemical assassination attempt. They're demanding accountability. It was an accident. Irrelevant. The Vexnorian concept of justice doesn't recognize intent. Action is what matters. Morgan pushed aside her empty plate. The Vexnorian battle fleet will reach Earth orbit in approximately 3 days. Ellie felt dizzy. And then what? Best case scenario? They demand your public execution. And worst case? They glass the planet. At Ellie's horrified expression, Morgan added, "That's bureaucratic hyperbole for reduce the surface to molten slag. They're very dramatic in their official communications." The restaurant door opened, and Professor Quint slid into the booth beside Morgan, looking like he hadn't slept. "You're late," Morgan said. "Traffic," Quint replied. "Also, I had to lose my Ziltoid tail. They've got spies everywhere since the incident." Ellie looked between them. "You two know each other," and Morgan and Quint exchanged glances. "Jill and I go way back," Quint said. "Before I was a professor, I worked for a certain agency." "You were a spy?" Ellie asked incredulously. "I'd prefer interstellar intelligence operative," Quint sniffed. "I was the first human to infiltrate Vexnorian high society. Spent 3 years undercover as a botanical assistant to their previous ambassador." "Which is why he's here," Morgan said. "Quint knows Vexnorian culture better than anyone. We need to formulate a response that won't end with Earth becoming an asteroid field." Quint pulled out a tablet. "I've been analyzing their communications. They're invoking the Treaty of Rigel, Article 7. "That's not good," Morgan muttered. "What's the Treaty of Rigel?" Ellie asked. "Interstellar agreement regarding biological weapons," Quint explained. "If they can prove Earth deliberately deployed caffeine as a weapon against a diplomatic envoy, they have legal justification for a proportional response." "But it wasn't deliberate." "Then we need to prove that," Morgan said. "We need evidence that this was an accident, not an attack." Ellie's phone buzzed again. A message from D-Hugh, "Turn on the news now." She pulled up a news app. The headline made her stomach drop. Earth student identified as coffee terrorist, Ellie Novak, 20, accused of orchestrating Vexnorian ambassador attack. The article featured her student ID photo alongside images of the ambassador's caffeine-induced meltdown. "That's just great," Morgan sighed. "Now you're the face of interstellar terrorism." "How did they get my DUG?" Quint said grimly. "He's Moldovan. They're information brokers, sold your identity to the highest bidder. Probably hiding in a bunker by now." And Morgan's phone chimed. Her expression darkened as she read the message. "The president is considering turning you over to the Vexnorians to avoid conflict." "They can't do that," Ellie protested. 7 billion lives versus one coffee-wielding community college student. Morgan raised an eyebrow. "It's not personal, it's math." Professor Quint cleared his throat. "Unless we can prove it was an accident and offer the Vexnorians something they want more than revenge." "Like what?" Ellie asked desperately. "I have a theory," Quint leaned forward, "based on my time with them. The Vexnorians are addicted to status. If we could somehow make Earth essential to their social standing in the Galactic Cooperative." Morgan nodded slowly. "The Caffeine Accord." "What's that?" Ellie asked. "Something we've considered proposing for years," Morgan explained. "A controlled trade agreement where Earth supplies caffeine-derived products to species who can safely consume them under strict diplomatic oversight. The Vexnorians would control access," Quint added. "It would make them the gatekeepers to one of the most coveted substances in the galaxy." "Will that work?" Ellie asked. "Maybe," Morgan said. "If we can get to Ambassador K. Rax before the fleet arrives. Once they're in orbit, diplomacy gets much harder. Where is he now?" "Recovery wing of the Galactic Embassy," Quint said. "Heavily guarded, still experiencing caffeine psychosis, and probably planning your execution." So we just need to sneak into a secure alien facility, convince a hallucinating ambassador not to destroy Earth, and negotiate an interstellar drug deal, Ellie summarized. Pretty much, Morgan confirmed. Great, Ellie slumped in her seat. And all because I wanted an easy science credit. The Galactic Embassy didn't look like an embassy at all. From the outside, it was a perfectly ordinary office building in downtown Chicago with reflective windows and a discreet sign reading International Trade Consultants, LLC. Reception filter, Professor Quint explained as they observed from across the street. Anyone without clearance or alien DNA sees a boring corporate headquarters. In reality, it's 120 stories tall and extends 5 miles underground. Agent Morgan handed Ellie what looked like a tourist's lanyard. Put this on. It's a basic cloaking device. It won't fool their scanners, but it might get you past visual inspection. Might? Ellie squeaked. This plan has approximately a 12% chance of success, Morgan said matter-of-factly. But it's better than the 0% chance of Earth surviving if we do nothing. They had spent the previous day tracking down Diug, who was indeed hiding in what he called his emergency immersion chamber, but what was actually a rented storage unit filled with canned sardines and alien tech. After some aggressive negotiation, mostly consisting of Agent Morgan threatening to report him to both Earth and Maldavian authorities, Diug had agreed to help. Now he approached them, looking simultaneously terrified and resigned. I've confirmed my security credentials still work, he said, but they won't get us past the Vexnorian security detail. They've brought in Canopian guard dogs. What are those? Ellie asked. Imagine a Doberman crossed with a squid that can smell fear from 3 miles away, Quint said cheerfully. Diug nodded. We'll need a distraction. Morgan checked her watch. The distraction arrives in 3, 2, 1. On cue, a delivery truck with planetary pizza emblazoned on the side pulled up to the embassy's service entrance. Pizza? Ellie asked incredulously. Aliens love it, Quint shrugged. Universal constant across all known species. That's actually how Italy got a permanent seat on the secret Earth Council. Morgan handed Ellie a small earpiece. We'll guide you from here. Diug will get you inside, then you're on your own to find the ambassador. Quint and I can't go in, we're both flagged in their security system. What am I supposed to say to the ambassador? The truth, Morgan replied simply, and then offer him the caffeine accord. I've uploaded the details to this. She handed over a small metallic sphere. Standard diplomatic proposal orb. Just press the top when you're ready to present it. As they approached the service entrance behind the pizza delivery, Ellie whispered to Diug, I still don't understand why you're helping. You sold me out. Diug had the decency to look ashamed. En fait, I panicked and reported what happened. I didn't expect the galactic media to make you public enemy number 1. Besides, if Earth gets destroyed, I lose my favorite planet for anthropological research. The pizza delivery guy, who was either oblivious to or complicit in their plan, left the service door propped open as he argued with the security guard about the bill. Diug pulled Ellie through while they were distracted. Inside was a dizzying maze of corridors that seemed to shift and change direction. Signs in dozens of alien languages lined the walls, none of them helpful. Ambassador K-Rax will be in the medical wing, Diug whispered. Sub-level 3, Section G. How do we get there? Carefully. They navigated through what seemed like miles of corridors, occasionally ducking into alcoves to avoid patrolling security or bizarre alien maintenance crews that floated rather than walked. Twice they had to backtrack when they encountered areas with atmosphere settings clearly not designed for human lungs. Finally, they reached a door labeled with what looked like a medical symbol if medical symbols were typically designed to induce mild nausea when viewed directly. This is it, Diug said. The ambassador's recovery chamber. I can't go in. Vexnorians can smell Maldovian pheromones. You're leaving me? I'll monitor from the security hub. As psyched up. If you get arrested, I'll probably run away, but I'll feel bad about it. He handed her a small device, emergency teleporter. One-time use, emergencies only. It's calibrated to Agent Morgan's location. Before Ellie could respond, Diog had scurried away, leaving her alone outside the ambassador's door. "Great pep talk," she muttered, then took a deep breath and entered. The room inside was dark except for a purplish glow emanating from a pod in the center. The air smelled like lavender and copper. Floating near the ceiling were small orbs that might have been lights or security cameras, or possibly both. From the pod came a weak voice. "Who enters the chamber of Ambassador K. Rax, victim of Earth's most heinous attack since their invention of reality television?" Ellie stepped forward. It's Ellie Novak, the coffee girl." The pod's top slid open with a hiss, and Ambassador K. Rax sat up. His normally iridescent skin was now a dull grey, and the flower collar around his neck had wilted dramatically. He squinted at her with bloodshot silver eyes. "You," he croaked. "The chemical weapon wielder. Have you come to finish what you started? My neurons cannot endure another assault." "No. I came to apologize. It was an accident, I swear. I didn't know coffee would affect you that way." K. Rax made a sound like a deflating balloon. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I broadcast myself declaring eternal friendship with a decorative fern. I attempted to mate with a sculpture. The High Council has viewed the recording 17 times. I'm really sorry. I was next in line for planetary overseer. Now I'll be lucky if they let me monitor asteroid belts." Ellie hesitated, then reached into her pocket for Morgan's orb. "What if I could offer you something that would make you a hero instead of a laughingstock?" K. Rax's wilted flowers perked up slightly. "Explain." She pressed the top of the orb. A holographic document unfurled in the air between them, text scrolling in multiple languages. "The Caffeine Accord," she said. "Earth offers exclusive trade rights for caffeine products to the Vexnorian Empire, who would regulate its distribution throughout the galaxy. You'd control access to one of the most valuable substances in the universe." The ambassador's eyes widened as he scanned the document. "This is surprisingly comprehensive. Your people would be the gatekeepers. Every species that can safely consume caffeine would have to go through Vexnorian customs. You'd have diplomatic leverage over half the galaxy, and your world would avoid destruction," K. Rax observed shrewdly. "That too." For a long moment, K. Rax was silent, his flowers slowly changing from wilted brown to a more vibrant yellow. "The caffeine incident would need to be reframed," he said finally. "Not as an attack, but as an unorthodox trade negotiation. We could call it a cultural exchange that got lost in translation," Ellie suggested. "And you, coffee terrorist, would need a new title. Perhaps Caffeine Ambassador?" "Wait, what?" K. Rax was fully animated now, his skin regaining its iridescent sheen. "Yes, you would be Earth's representative in all caffeine-related diplomacy. It's perfect. The being who nearly caused war becomes the architect of the most significant trade agreement in recent galactic history. But I'm just a student." "Details." K. Rax waved dismissively. "I shall present this to my government immediately. The battle fleet will be repurposed as a trade armada." He pressed a series of buttons on his pod, and suddenly the room was filled with holographic faces, presumably the Vexnorian High Council. "Esteemed colleagues," K. Rax announced grandly, "I have negotiated a most advantageous arrangement with Earth's caffeine ambassador." As the ambassador launched into an elaborate explanation that framed the entire coffee incident as an elaborate negotiation strategy, Ellie's earpiece crackled to life. "Nicely done," came Agent Morgan's voice. "Just smile and nod. You've just prevented Interstellar War. And apparently gotten a new job," Ellie whispered back. "So does." "Yes, about that." Morgan sounded almost amused. "Congratulations on your diplomatic appointment. The good news is it comes with full college credit." 3 months later. The Vexnorian delegation requests a double espresso with caramel drizzle and something called extra whip. The alien aide looked confused as he read from his translator. "Coming right up." Ellie replied, carefully preparing the drink behind the newly installed diplomatic beverage counter in what had once been the campus cafeteria, and it was now the Earth branch of the Interstellar Caffeine Regulatory Commission. The line of alien diplomats, scientists, and thrill-seekers stretched out the door. Ever since the ratification of the Caffeine Accord, Lakeview Community College had become an unlikely hotspot for interstellar tourism. Ellie handed the espresso to the aide, who carried it reverently to Ambassador K. Rax. The Vexnorian observed from behind a protective force field as his subordinates carefully analyzed the drink's chemical composition before allowing cleared species to sample it, in controlled doses. "Business is booming," Professor Quint remarked, joining Ellie behind the counter. His tweed jacket had been replaced by a slightly less rumpled suit with an official-looking pin that designated him a xenobiological safety consultant. 300% increase in applicants to the Xenobiology program, Ellie noted. "Though I think they're disappointed when they learn it's not all preventing wars with breakfast beverages." "Most diplomacy is disappointingly mundane," agreed Agent Morgan, who had dropped her cover entirely and now openly coordinated security for the facility. "But you've handled the transition admirably, Ambassador Novak." Ellie smiled faintly at the title. "Still getting used to that one. I just wanted to finish my thesis." "Your thesis has evolved into the definitive galactic treatise on caffeine's cross-species effects," Professor Quint said proudly. 17 citations already from the Andromeda Scientific Quarterly alone. Agent Morgan gestured to where a group of jellyfish-like hydrolians floated near the ceiling, their translucent bodies pulsing with delight after consuming specially formulated cold brew through osmotic membranes. "The UN is pleased. Who'd have thought our first successful interspecies trade agreement would involve coffee?" Ellie watched as a chitinous Kree-Lak warrior ceremoniously sipped from a tiny Demitas cup, its mandibles clicking with satisfaction. The species had initially been catalogued as potentially hostile until discovering mochas. "Dr. Chen's still analyzing why caffeine has such universal appeal," Ellie said. "Something about how it binds to receptor sites common across carbon-based life forms." Speaking of Dr. Chen, Morgan nodded toward the entrance where Lin was escorting a delegation of towering, crystalline beings. "The Quartz Collective is here for their appointment." Lin waved excitedly. Since the Accord, she'd become the facility's leading researcher on non-carbon-based caffeine alternatives. Ambassador Novak called a familiar voice. Ellie turned to see Captain Taz Ree approaching, no longer wearing the translator device. Her English was now flawless, with only a slight musical lilt. "Captain," Ellie greeted her. "Your language studies are impressive." "As are yours," Taz Ree replied. "I heard your presentation to the Galactic Council was delivered in perfect standard Orion." Ellie shrugged modestly. "The Universal Translator did most of the work." "Not according to my sources," Morgan interjected. "They're calling you the caffeine diplomat in 17 sectors." A commotion near the door drew their attention. A small, furry alien with enormous eyes pushed through the crowd, holding what appeared to be a plant specimen. Ambassador Novak. It squeaked in translated English. "I am Zix, botanist from Proxima Centauri b. We have engineered a coffee hybrid that grows in our atmosphere. We wish to establish a trade agreement." Professor Quint raised his eyebrows. "Alien-grown coffee? That would be a first." "That's what they said about sharing our coffee 3 months ago," Ellie replied, moving to greet the excited botanist. She caught her reflection in the polished counter, the same grad student who'd once been overwhelmed by ordinary academic pressure, now confidently striding toward interstellar agricultural negotiations. Captain Taz Ree fell into step beside her. "You know, when I requested that first cup of coffee, I never imagined that it would prevent an interspecies incident, that I would develop such an expensive habit," Taz Ree admitted with a laugh. "My crew's coffee rations are depleting our military budget." As they reached the botanist, Ellie's phone buzzed with a notification from the UN Secretary-General requesting an urgent consultation about a new species arriving next week, apparently sensitive to caffeine but very interested in something called herbal tea. Ellie sighed contentedly. Life had certainly become more complicated, but she wouldn't trade it for anything. Professor, she called over her shoulder. I think we're going to need a bigger beverage counter.